She'll find a way. Hello? Hello? Does this work? Oh, yeah, that's okay.
Not going anywhere. Dad is engaged. The lives makes a lot of sense for us. So, it's not fair.
We're pretty proud of ourselves. Been there.
So it's the neighborhood. I'll talk a little bit about our buyer initiative. Powderhorn itself is the neighborhood with the most home buyer initiative. There's about 25 homeowners that just live in Powderhorn itself.
Okay. Okay, yeah, just interesting. What
4 or
that
5 homeowners that just live on my block alone, 15th, all the way up.
Wow, wow. We got attracted there 40 years ago, just as one of the, just had the long term diversity, both racially and economically, because it's been interesting to be economically. Yeah.
Prices are creeping up, but it
Yeah.
still isn't as bad as a lot of other places in the city.
Yeah. Yeah. It really wasn't until the last 15 years or so. Right before the crisis of
But
the early odds, but while the rest of the city was going up in the 90s, we were crack cocaine. So our prices.
what was your livelihood?
I did, my main work was investment. So, some of General Mills, but mostly a managed. Then I left that, so I did that for 25 years, and I flip is I help people accumulate wealth for 25 years. Then I went to be a philanthropy person, give person a better world, so I help people be a
Nice, nice. Good.
and they were both fun.
Yeah.
They're remunerated,
Yeah.
but the overall remunerations are good. But
Well, I'll talk a little bit about, we started a new program. It really happened after the number of investor have reached out to us, selling their homes to a discount. And I'm sure you had dealt with this then, kind of on the gift side of things. The IRS form, free donation of land and
I didn't do any land.
Okay.
deals, but,
well, these are properties. I mean, they're homes that homeowners are discounted.
some farmers that just- Well, let me pass out a little bit of this. and then
Okay.
I think-
Let me know if you need.
Let's. When you look at the home.
Sometimes you.
Okay, yep.
Yeah, it was,
The US military.
um, oh, traveling to Nicaragua and South. Yeah, great experience.
Yeah, well.
You have a seat? Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning. Thank you for coming. I am so pleased that we have the opportunity to learn more about a very important organization in our city, an organization that has been doing amazing work, is doing and will be doing amazing work, some of which is impacting us right here in Phillips neighborhood. The City of Lakes Community Land Trust is one of the 3 organizations that we made a grant to as part of our first round of reparations work this past year. Today, we're very fortunate to have Jeff Washburn, who's been at City of Lakes Land Trust only for 20-some years. Is that right, Jeff?
Yes, 21.
21 years, okay. And Jeff is a graduate of DePauw. His graduate degree is from Hamlin here in the Twin Cities. He's worked in a variety of housing works even before his work at City of Lakes Land Trust. He's serves on the boards of North Point Health and Wellness, the Land Bank Twin Cities, the Community Action Partnership of Suburban Hennepin County, and the Minnesota Community Land Trust Coalition. So he's got a number of really important connections that we'll be interested in hearing. We want to hear the story of the City of Lakes Land Trust and perhaps get into how we can be partners. With that, Jeff, take it away.
Thanks. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jeff. Thank you, Michael, for the introduction. Thank you for your support of our organization. A little bit about me. I currently live in Powderhorn Park neighborhood, but as shown with Mike, I've lived in the Corcoran neighborhood, the Longfellow community, lived in Southwest Minneapolis for a bit, and then more recently, lived in North Minneapolis in the Harrison neighborhood for about 5 years before migrating my way back to South Minneapolis. So never lived in Northeast or Southeast Minneapolis, but I've always lived in Minneapolis since moving here in the late 90s. So hopeful today to go through the Community Land Trust approach to home ownership. I'm going to start high and then drill down to the City of Lakes Community Land Trust and our work in the community, and then really hoping that we'll just have a good conversation about Community Land Trust. I think it always works best if there's a question, if I'm not clear on something, raise your hand, let's talk about it. And if I know for sure that it's coming up in an upcoming slide, I'll let folks know and move on, but I think it's best just to treat it more as a conversation. I get really tired of listening to myself talk. So high level, currently there's about 350 community land trusts in the United States. And we're only counting land trusts where there's at least one home in trust. So there's a lot of what I'll call community land trusts that are in concept right now or starting to bubble up in numerous communities, but these are all community land trusts that have at least one home in trust. Here in Minnesota, there are 13 community land trusts. Back in the early 2000s, we formed another entity called the Minnesota Community Land Trust Coalition. Most of our work recently has been more on the advocacy front, working at the Capitol, but we've also, I think, really established a strong peer-to-peer network here. And I think some of the most respected land trusts in the nation actually are here in Minnesota. And the reason for that is that early on, our housing finance agency, which I have plenty of sour words for, but to their credit, early on, not only invested, I think, in community land trusts and currently invest heavily in community land trusts, but they also, our finance agency is a pretty big bank. And so their willingness to buy land trust loans from all types of other mortgage lenders really gave us a head start here in Minnesota over a lot of other states. And I think that really kind of lent to why there's such a high concentration of community land trust homes here in the state of Minnesota. I might be wrong on this, but I'm pretty solid in that Minnesota has more community land trust homes, ownership homes, than any other state in the nation.
And just timing, when you said early on, there's support was there, is that what kind of year?
You know, late 90s, and our organization started in 2002. So even before we got going, our agency was playing a pretty vital role. And it just gave confidence to some of those, if you remember back 20 years ago, Wells Fargo, US Bank, Bremer Bank. I think with Minnesota Housing being willing to purchase those loans, it just gave those banks confidence, and they started their own portfolio products as well. So US Bank and Bremer to this day will still buy mortgages from organizations like ours and hold them in-house because I think they know that they're good loans. Here in the Twin Cities Metro, there are 7 community land trusts. Our organization serves the city of Minneapolis, but there's another land trust that serves the balance of Hennepin County, one in Ramsey County, one in Washington County, one in Carver County, one in Scott County. Currently, there's not coverage in Dakota County nor Anoka County, but pretty much the balance of the metro area is covered by community land trust. Areas that don't have a community land trust, our Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity affiliate has a land trust within their larger entity. So they currently have about 31 homes in trust. Most of those are in Dakota and Anoka counties. So a lot of concentration of community land trust activity here. Twin Cities Metro, there are more community land trust homes in trust, ownership units in trust here than any other metropolitan area in the United States. And we just don't talk about ourselves that way, really, because there's 7 community land trusts here. We don't talk about our work in the aggregate, but it's a pretty decent concentration, and I think a lot of expertise and knowledge comes from Minnesota. And then just where we are today. I started back in 2022, and I'd speak to a group like this, and not a single person would even know what a community land trust was, let alone maybe heard of them. We're at a point now where I think not only do a lot of folks in our community know, at least have heard about what a community land trust is, or maybe know somebody who purchased through the land trust, but policymakers and others, given the increasing costs, I think increasingly are looking at shared equity home ownership or affordable home ownership through the land trust as a viable means, just because it is getting way too expensive. There's got to be a return on that investment for the public sector as well.
When you go to this talk other places and you're getting to this part, you can say, and I was at our Saviors and their church president is an Avalon.
Thank you. So to drilling down to Minneapolis, City Lakes Community Land Trust, we were formed back in 2002. It was not my idea. I was not the founder. A group of folks, primarily in South Minneapolis, came together and said, costs are getting out of hand. Have these conversations every 5, 10, 15 years. We need to do something about that. We should start a land trust in South Minneapolis. They hired a consultant, did a whole bunch of focus groups, and out of that work was decided that we wouldn't just serve South Minneapolis, but we would serve all of Minneapolis. And at that time, we were going to really focus on just long-term affordability. We weren't going to become a developer at that point in time. Things have changed, and I'll talk about that. But that was our charge coming out of the gate. Some of the first 4 community land trust homes are just a few blocks from here off of Oakland and 22nd. Hope Community, to their credit, as we were getting started, when they started to develop their corner, what I call the southeast corner of Portland and Franklin, they said, let's do some ownership units as well. We'll start to raise some money. And so there's 4 units on 22nd Street that were the first 4 homes in trust. About the same time, another nonprofit entity called PRG, located down on 38th and 21st Avenues, did the Franklin Station townhomes. So if you're thinking just west of Cedar Avenue on Franklin, I'm sorry, on 24th Street, there's 28 townhomes there. 15 of those 28 units were sold, and some of the first buyers were part of the land trust. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, to slow you down. Could you just say what it is exactly? Is that if it's in some stuff is in a land trust? I mean, you know,
It's coming. Yep. What I wanted to provide just a context before we jump into it. There's roughly 360 homes in trust, and we've assisted about 480 households. That delta between the 480 and the 360 are resales, which will help get to that question about what it is and how we do what we do. But that resales thing, that number is pretty important. And then we have a whole bunch of different programs that we've been able to assist households over the years get into home ownership. So I'll break those down a little bit as well. So here's your, so here, 60 seconds, and then I'm looking at the next slide already. But essentially what we do is bridge the difference between what a lower income household can get a mortgage for and the cost of the property. In most cases, we're coming in with anywhere between 20 and 50% of the purchase price of the property. In exchange for that, in most cases, in exchange for that investment from our organization, at closing, we take title of the land and the homeowner retains title to the structure or the building on top of the land. And the reason we do that is so that we have a legal lock on the property, so that if and when the homeowner ever goes to sell, they agree to sell to another low or moderate income household, and they agree to resale restrictions or resale formula when they go to sell. And I'm just going to bring up an example of our resale formula. So let's assume that everybody in this room is going to buy you fell in love with a $250,000 home. We have all, for argument's sake, we're only pre-approved for a mortgage for $150,000. Work with the land trust, go through our pre-purchase process, go through buyer education, those kinds of things. Come out of that, and the land trust is able to invest the $100,000 difference. So at closing, you come to closing with your mortgage for $150,000. The land trust is coming with a check for $100,000. Our $100,000 is made up primarily of public sector dollars from the state, the county, the city, and maybe even neighborhood level. Blend all that together so we can put it into that $100,000. We write that check, come to closing. At closing, we get title of the land, the homeowner gets title of the improvements. Homeowner lives in the home making mortgage payments on that $150,000 mortgage versus a $250,000 mortgage. They keep doing that as long as they want to live there. At some point in time, let's say 10 years later, they decide to sell, or we decide to sell. It's us that I'm talking about. Now the value of the property is $350,000. So over 10 years, it's gone up $100,000 in value. With our community land trust, we use a 25% appraisal-based resale formula. So what that means is that the homeowner is going to get all the principal they paid down on their first mortgage. If they had any down payment assistance that was forgiven, 100% of that was theirs. If they came in with down payment, those dollars would be theirs as well, plus 25% of any increase in value. So essentially 25,000 of that $100,000 increase in value. What it means for the long-term community ownership and affordability is that 75% of that appreciation is going to be added to the 100,000 that the land trust used to help all of us buy the home. Now there's $175,000 worth of affordability assistance that's backed off that new appraised value of $350,000. So the way I like to think about it, new value, $350,000, less the $100,000 the land trust gave to us to help us buy the home, less 75% of that $100,000 increase gets us to a future sales price through the land trust of $175,000. So that's how it works. A lot of times, you know, the knock against the land trust is, doesn't allow folks to create wealth, keeps low income people poor. Some of the things that we hear about. I think what's important to recognize is that none of us were able to go out and buy that $250,000 home. And so our options were keep renting, or maybe find a family member who's going to give us $100,000, or find some other way to find $100,000. But the reality is, what the land trust does is create the opportunity to get into home ownership. And I think increasingly, and I'll talk a little bit, hopefully if we have time, I think there's going to be some pretty big down payment assistance that's going to be coming out through the legislative work that's happening right now. For a household to take advantage, let's say it's $30,000 if we're given down payment assistance. You're never going to be able to take advantage of that for giving down payment assistance unless you can get into a purchase agreement to be able to buy a home. And so what the land trust does is it's a vehicle to help folks jump into home ownership at a time when it's increasingly more difficult to get into home ownership.
And it keeps it affordable in the future. Isn't this a way of limiting gentrification or some of the negative aspects of gentrification?
It absolutely does. Yes. Our goal is to keep that home permanently affordable through the ownership of the land. The way, when we talk about community accountability, the way our organization responds to that is we are a membership organization. So my bosses are 15 board members. At any given time, at least 5 of those board members have to be homeowners who purchase through the land trust. So 5 of my bosses are homeowners. And I could speak for a long time about why philosophically, I think that's a really important thing for nonprofits. But that board of directors is elected by the membership. So everybody who's purchased a home through the land trust is automatically a member. And then anyone who contributes at least $1 a year and subscribes to the mission of the CLCLT is also a member. So that membership is required if we ever wanted to sell a parcel of land. We would take a majority vote of the membership to sell a parcel of land. We take a majority of the membership to also change our bylaws and that ground lease document. So the document that we use that is a relationship between the homeowner and the land trust is called our ground lease. And for us to make any changes to that, it also requires the membership to vote. So even if I think it's a good idea or not, or our board thinks it's a good idea or not, we can't make some of those fundamental changes unless the entire membership thinks it's a good idea.
So it's really a good strong lock.
I'd like to think so.
Yeah.
We've never lost a home to the market. That number a couple slides ago, when I said 120 resales, we've had 120 resales. In every instance, the homes have maintained and stayed affordable for another low income household. In many cases, we've seen 2 to 3 resales on some of the properties. I didn't know what I was doing 20 years ago. I took this job. People would be like, do you think this thing is going to work? And I cross my fingers and I say, yeah. But I will stand here. I share with Mike, I'm leaving at the end of June. It's enough time. It's time to move on. But it's worked so much better than I ever thought that it would. So much better. This past summer, we had 3 resales in Powderhorn Park. All homeowners who purchased during the mortgage foreclosure crisis. At that point in time, there was a lot of federal money that was coming into the community. So in most cases, the typical purchase back in the 2010s, 11s, was that properties, previously foreclosed properties, were selling for $120,000. We were able to provide $60,000 in assistance back then. Buyers were getting into home ownership for that $60,000 land trust, but there's also down payment assistance money then too. So we had a number of buyers who were only getting mortgages for $30,000 or $40,000, buying a $120,000 home, which was amazing. And on top of that, we had rehab money. So we were coming with up to $60,000 or $70,000 to take care of deferred maintenance rehab.
It's gonna happen again.
Great deal back then, right? Fast forward to this past summer, we had 3 resales in Powderhorn Park. All 3 of those resales, the values went above $300,000. We had 3 resales this past summer where folks were buying $300,000 plus properties for roughly about $100,000 land trust price because of this resale formula. I think what it did, and to the question of reparations and what we could be doing, situations like that, our organization has the preemptive right of first refusal. And so our board stepped back and said, because what happened is these homeowners listed their home and our upper income cap is 80% of median income, which is still lower income. But we strive, and I'll talk a little bit about this, we strive to serve households at closer to 50% AMI. And so we felt like we were missing opportunities. When a homeowner went to list their home, it was easy. They had dozens, if not 40 or 50 folks interested in putting in purchase offers. But in situations like that, what we started to think about, maybe these are situations where we just need to preemptively buy those properties back. And then instead of selling them at 80% AMI, just put an artificial income limit on those so that we're targeting lower income households, so that households who are even lower income really are the ones who are able to snatch up the opportunity, like $100,000 land trust price for a $300,000 property. So I think stepping way back, it's worked much better than I ever thought. Things like that have started to surface now to say, this is a really powerful thing. If you own the land, you can really dictate the terms of future resales for good. And I think those are the opportunities that our organization is kind of jumping into now.
Can I just observe at that same time in 2009 and 2010, we had private investors, some in state, some out of state, buying houses at 100,000 or 120,000. And then 10 years later, selling them for 3 times and making some nice money for their investors. Or you had families, I'm guessing some BIPOC families, who even at 25% now have $50,000 in their bank account they never had before. Once they sold it. So that's, you know, if this can be done at bigger scale, can have some impact on it.
What typically happens to those 120 people that have resold the houses? Like, what's their next step? What opportunity do they get because of this situation in their life?
So in the booklet handout, see somebody holding them. You look on, so for every 2 years or so, we've been surveying existing homeowners, asking that question of, got into home ownership, how's it going? Are you doing better? Are you doing worse? Because clearly if you're doing worse, we shouldn't be doing what we're doing. So we're checking in with homeowners, ideally on an every 2-year basis. This last, is now almost 2 years ago now, we also included past homeowners in that survey. So existing homeowners, we had over a 60% response rate, which I think is really good. Past homeowners, we reached out to as many as we could. I think we had a 33% response rate on past homeowners. But of the folks that responded, over 70% went on to buy a market rate home within 2 years. And so I think, you know, and that's not everyone, that was, you know, only a third of all the past homeowners, but I think those are the things we're trying to prove out, is to say, what's changed in folks' lives. And I think the key thing for me, and maybe the shift in my mind that's occurred over the years, is when we first started, I was going to every closing and we would see first generation, first time home buyers breaking down in tears. Like, I never thought I could get into home ownership. I'm so happy I was able to do it, which was powerful. It still is super powerful. I think the thing that I've come to realize now is talking with homeowners 2 or 3 years into home ownership to say what's changed. And it's playing out that narrative to say, I never thought I could buy a home. I went and I bought a home. And when I realized I could do that, I realized I don't need to maybe stay with my current job. And so I went out and I got a better job, or I went back and I got an adult degree so that I could further my, and so it's the stability, but I think more importantly, what I picked up on, it's confidence. That home ownership is a tool to gain confidence. And then you see homeowners doing all these other things in their lives that maybe they didn't think they'd be able to do. I don't know if the land trust has a big role to play, other than we're a financing mechanism that allows folks to help their families do what's best for them. And they're already very motivated to do better for themselves and their families. Yes, sir.
So I have, I just started I help people with their homes and houses. I've been involved in short sales and trash outs and clean outs. And so I have clients and friends who own houses. They own them outright. They've been there for 25, 30 years. They don't pay a mortgage. But they need $15,000 to replace the roof, or to replace a boiler, or to put in a new fence or something like that. And I want to mention, you know, there's a HELOC from your credit union, get a HELOC or something, or is there something here that the land trust organization could help with repairs? Not necessarily remodels, but just repairs.
I'm gonna get to that
Okay.
as I talk about our programs, where we've been able to use the land trust to assist existing homeowners with the land trust. Any questions on this resale formula before I move on? Yes.
So I'm the president that just bought a house. And the resale. Like, whether I make. No. Yeah, permanent affordability was one of the big things that. Yeah.
Okay, so that relationship with a homeowner, a long-term agreement, as I mentioned, we typically call it a ground lease. It's signed at closing for single-family homes, townhomes, or duplexes. If it's a condo, so there are 4 condos in South Minneapolis. Let's call it, there's 5 units at Cedar and 28th, the northwest corner. There's a 15-unit condo development. 5 of those 15 are land trust units. There's 2 units above the formerly, I guess, where the bad waitress used to be on 26 and Nicollet. So 2 of 26 of those units. 7 of 35 units. There's a condo development at 33rd in Nicollet, just north of where the Burger King used to be. Mentioning past restaurants here. And the last one, wrapping the parking garage at Midtown, the Midtown Exchange. PPL built 52 condo units. 10 of the 52 units in that condo development are tied to the land trust as well. So we use a deed restriction because we don't own the land in those situations. We are moving forward, and I think part of your investment in us was tied to the news around our redevelopment of 628 Franklin. It's moving along really quickly, but there'll be 7 condos that will all be affordable through the land trust in that development. In that situation, because all the units will be tied to the land trust, we'll retain ownership of the land and then just use a ground lease, a pro rata share of that ground lease for each of those units on that particular development. But I think as our town here, Minneapolis, starts to become more city-like, I think that we will get to a point where there will be more condos and we have a mechanism to account for it. It's not as solid of a document as the ground lease. I mean, ownership of the land really helps out if there is a foreclosure or if things go sideways, because the bank then still is, they need to work with us to come up with a solution on those situations. And in those unfortunate situations, we have a little bit more negotiating power in those conversations versus having to buy back a condo prior to the redemption date. Resale restrictions, as I shared, must be sold to another income qualified buyer. And then we use that resale formula to calculate it. And we're also there for the resale. We have within or underneath the City Lakes Community Land Trust, we do have a real estate LLC. So we have the ability to offer real estate services at a discounted price. But then we also, if a homeowner wants to work with a realtor of their own, they're able to do that. And we're still there to help manage and make sure that the buyer, whoever's buying that property, is going through the land trust education on that front as well. So the ground lease, again, our organization holds the land in trust. We're bound by the hip. Our success is dependent on the success of the homeowner. I think that's the thing we learned early on, is that, look, we need to stay connected to homeowners, because if we're not, we want to make sure that if they do run into trouble, that they're reaching out to us and we can get ahead of this. Life happens and people miss mortgage payments, or they get behind. What we want is to have a relationship so that folks will feel comfortable reaching out to us in the event that there is a hardship. We can get ahead of it. Banks don't want to foreclose on people. State or the county doesn't want to take away their property because of tax, lack of tax payments. People want to find solutions, and if you can provide a solution that doesn't cause too much pain, more often than not, banks or government are willing to work to find a solution. And that's where I think we've been really successful, is just pitching some of those solutions and seeing if we can make them work. And then the deed restriction, housing subsidy covenant, again, we use when we don't own the land, and it's a restriction on the airspace. The ground lease is a 99-year renewable document. So if somebody happened to live in their home for 99 years, we have a preemptive right to go back and say we want to renew for another 99 years. With the deed restriction, it's a 30-year document. So in theory, somebody could stay in their condo for 30 years, and potentially our affordability investment would get lost. But we still feel that it's still working as well as what a second mortgage would, and it's still an effective tool to do that. And more often than not, folks that have purchased condos kind of turn them over at a more frequent level than a single family home with land underneath it. So along with this relationship with the land trust, homeowners do pay our organization $20 a month. It's called a ground lease fee. And those dollars come to our organization, help more buyers get into home ownership, keep our lights on, those kinds of things for the organization. But there is that cost to the relationship. As I mentioned, the ground lease is 99 years. The deed restriction is 30 years. Anytime there's a title transfer, those clocks start back over as well. So anytime somebody resells their home, or let's say somebody passes and their kid steps up and takes title of the property, that 99-year ground lease would start back over at that point in time. So we do like to think of them as perpetually affordable agreements or affordable homes. And then inheritable. So one of the things, and this has really been the only instance where we've had to go back to the membership to get a vote for a change. But early on, when we developed the ground lease, the initial language, homeowners could leave their homes to a spouse or a partner, or they could leave it to either a spouse or partner, regardless of their income. But if somebody wanted to leave their home to anybody else, including their children, their kids would also have to be income qualified. And so, I don't know, after we assisted maybe 20, 25 homeowners, we check in and say, what worked, what didn't work. And overwhelmingly, homeowners said, everything feels all right, but it doesn't sit right with me that I can't leave my home to my kid if they're not income qualified. And so we said, all right, there's a means to change that. And so at one of those early membership meetings, a group of homeowners proposed that we add children to the ground lease, regardless of income. So that change was made. It required a majority vote of the membership at the time. Whether or not I thought it was a good idea or not didn't matter, because there was a means for homeowners to instill that change. And that's been the only instance to be able to do that. Now, again, homeowners can leave their home to anybody, but that next person has to be income qualified if they want to stay and live in the property. If not, we would sell the property. Whoever was the heir would still get those proceeds the same way the homeowner would, but they just wouldn't be able to live in the home. So benefits, CLT homeowners, able to buy a home that you otherwise would not have been able to purchase, stability of home ownership, consistent mortgage principal and interest payments. Other thing that just happened, this was huge. 2 years ago, the city of Minneapolis also has a shared equity program that CLCLT is the administrator for. It's a slightly different formula. It's a 2% fixed rate appreciation model. So if we go back to the slide where $250,000 property, buyers get it for $150,000 land trust price. In that instance, with a 2% fixed rate model, homeowners are going to get 2% of that 150 for every year they live in the property. That's going to be their return versus the 25% resale formula. So we're administering that program for the city. All that to say is that when the city was starting this program a couple of years back, they started to realize that property taxes could be an impediment to affordability. And so they went, thankful to them, they went to the city assessor's office and said, hey, is there anything we can do about this? And the city Minneapolis assessor's office went to the state and got a ruling from the Department of Revenue that basically said, we will allow you to essentially assess land trust properties at the affordable price versus the fair market value. So just last year, homeowners across the board, on average, saw over a 30% reduction in their property taxes, which is an absolute game changer for homeowners. Some homeowners saw significant savings in their property taxes. This year's legislature currently at play is reduction statewide in property taxes for land trust properties from the effective 1% tax rate to 0.75%. So that is included right now in both the House and the Senate bills. It will get negotiated out in the tax bill, but hopefully we're going to see across the state land trust homeowners seeing at least some relief in property taxes that will lend toward that affordability. What I love about this, that's money in the pockets of homeowners, right? It doesn't touch our organization, and it's clearly just more cash flow for households to do what they need to do in their families. Oh, and then we do post-purchase training. So every month we do 1 or 2 classes. Could be on investments. It could be on, we just did one on water intrusion. We do a few a year on the resale formula, just to make sure that folks are remembering it after a couple of years after purchasing, those kinds of things. And then for long-term affordability, I didn't update this slide. Ignore the numbers on that lower one. Essentially, that community wealth is growing over time, and there's a really good. I just cranked out the numbers on. This thing here. It's called our return on community investment report. So, and the numbers don't always look this good, given the increased appreciation of home values in the city. We work closely with the University of Minnesota, and essentially what we do is they put out good data. They have data on a neighborhood basis that shows the relative percentage increase year over year or decrease in value by neighborhood. So every year we take all the homes in trust, so the 360 homes, and we look at what neighborhood they're in, and we know how much the home cost when they purchased it, so we can basically show how much that home would be worth today using some relatively decent math. But essentially, we've invested $17 million over the 360 homes in the community land trust, and as of year end, those properties have gone up essentially $25 million in value. So if you take 75% of that $25 million increase in value, that 17 million that we've invested has actually grown by another $19 million. And so we're able to demonstrate back to the public sector that the dollars that we've put in have actually grown and more than doubled the 108% return on investment of public sector funds. And so I think for long-term community wealth, a very direct way of saying this works, and it doesn't always work if the market tanks, that number is going to go down, but we're still always able to preserve those initial investments and make sure that we have affordability gap for future generations of buyers. Questions? Yeah.
About the maintenance question.
So it's home ownership. And what we try to talk about up front is while we do collect a ground lease fee, the home and the land that folks are leasing from us is their responsibility. So they got to shovel, they got to mow. If there's an issue, folks have to take care of it. I think where we are helpful, somebody has plumbing issues or electrical issues, reach out to us. Of course, some contractors or subcontractors that we've worked with that we know are going to take care of them. We know that are going to take care of homeowners. We do these post-purchase trainings, and then refer folks if it's a larger fix. There are some loan funds out in town, those kinds of things. But generally, what we try to do is this is home ownership, and folks need to be responsible for those fixes. And the way we're trying to position it is if we can lower the in cost, and for us across the board, homeowners are paying less now for the principal, interest, taxes, and insurance payment on average less now than they were previously paying in rent. And so we're hoping that there's going to be a little bit of extra cash to be able to take care of their home. Home ownership is expensive. There's always something you got to take care of. And so I'm not trying to sugarcoat it. But if we can create as much breathing room as possible, you know, even the property taxes, allow folks to take care of fixes on their property is really important. Cost of everything has gone up. Many cases, if a hot water heater goes out today, it's a $2,000 fix now. It didn't used to be that much, but in many cases, that's more than a month's worth of somebody's income that's purchased a home with us. And so there are some potentially very fragile situations, and making sure that we have resources to help homeowners take care of those very basic things is really important.
Do you like loan or something like that? Like if somebody had.
We don't, not yet, but there are other organizations that do. Yeah. It would be a nice thing for us to have, and tough situations. When a homeowner can't obtain a loan on their own, we've stepped in and done that, and essentially kind of like a reverse mortgage. If the money's not there, we just take a greater share of the homeowner share of appreciation to make sure if we can recoup it later, we can do that. But if not, we just know the property's taken care of.
And that's the legacy project that you talked about at the end of a couple of these sheets. Sustained legacy, is that, what's that? That's the same thing?
No. So we just, if there's a homeowner who purchases a home and they're running into problems and they've expired every avenue, we'll figure out a way to make sure that they're taking care of their home, which is different. And I'll talk a little bit about the Project Sustained Legacy program.
That's lovely.
So I just wanted to bring back this slide again, back to our organization, the work that we do. So homes have come in through the land trust through a number of different ways. As I shared, we didn't start off as a developer, but we are a developer now, taking the lead on the property over on Franklin. We're working on 17 new townhomes with Habitat for Humanity, not far from our offices in the Harrison neighborhood. We don't have any new construction underway right now, but we have a couple planned, and then we're rehabbing 4 or 5 homes right now as the lead developer. So we'll get the work done, we'll list them, they'll be sold at a reduced price and be part of the land trust. Increasingly, we're also seeing homeowners, now that there's 360 households that live in land trust homes. Any given year, there's going to be 3 to 5% of the homeowners that are going to sell. And so those homes are constantly coming online, and we're looking for buyers to sell to those households. We partner with a whole bunch of nonprofit and for-profit developers. So they might build the home and then it's sold through the land trust. So I think a lot of ways that we're intersecting kind of on the front end with what I'll call new home purchases or product. Yes, sir.
Just curious, for the resales or whatever, is it like hard to find buyers or really easy because there's so many people that are kind of perched in that spot, or what's it like?
Just like I think real estate of the what I'll call the conditional or market, it depends on location. It depends on what households are looking for. There's a couple of homes that are just 2-bedroom, 1 bath. That's not going to work for everybody. So there are some niche properties. We had a heck of a time. We finally just closed on it, but a property up on 34th and Morgan in North Minneapolis, we saw 5 or 6 purchase agreements that all canceled over the last 18 months. We haven't held a property for that long in a long time, but it was just a tough property to sell. It was priced right. There's some blocks in North Minneapolis that are tougher, and I think this was one of those. But typically we don't have problems. Typically there's multiple purchase offers coming in on every resale, and stuff is moving quickly. Interest rates and the economy as a whole may impact that, but it's also going to impact the market. So our buyer initiative program is kind of our bread and butter program. We're constantly raising dollars for this program. We currently provide up to $100,000 for households below 60% of median income to go out and work with the realtor to buy a home, single family home or a duplex of choice anywhere in the city of Minneapolis. And so over the years, and when you look at the maps, a lot of the geographic dispersion is really attributed to this program, because buyers are the ones that are selecting the homes. All we're doing is showing up at closing with the affordability investment to help a buyer purchase the home of their choice. Then post-purchase, we have deferred maintenance and rehab dollars. So we're taking care of deferred maintenance on properties. If it needs a new roof, a new hot water heater, a new furnace. Clearly, if there's lead, asbestos, or radon issues, we're taking care of those health and safety issues on a property. And that's an outright grant that goes in the home post-purchase, ideally sometime between the first 6 and 12 months of home ownership. We're going in and taking care of those things. So it's kind of a two-part program where provide the dollars up front for the buyer to purchase a home, and then we have dollars post-purchase to take care of deferred maintenance and rehab, and we're managing that rehab on those properties.
That's what allowed me to stay.
So those rehab dollars don't go as far as they used to 10, 15 years ago. And we're always trying to raise more. Currently, we have about 30,000 back. Back in the mid 2010s, we had close to $60,000. So again, these are buckets of funds that part of my job over the years has been trying to fill those buckets so that we can keep helping households purchase homes of their choice. And then Project Sustain Legacy, I've hit pause on a couple of folks' questions on this thus far. Over the years, Hennepin County, through property taxes, City of Minneapolis through repairs or legal aid, working with households, have surfaced households, existing homeowners who in most cases did not have a first mortgage on their property. Think about an older gentleman or woman who lives on the block, who maybe inherited the home from their families. They've lived there forever. They're the foundations of our blocks. Everybody knows Joe or Bob or Sally. They've lived there forever, but then something happened. And it's typically a health instance. So a heart attack, a stroke, loss of spouse, and they just go off the rails financially. They stop paying their property taxes. Maybe they got some legal fees. They got behind on their utilities, and they're in bad financial place. Those entities, Hennepin County, the city, legal aid, have reached out to us and said, can you work with these households? So what we do is we go in and we solve for the debt problem, typically to the tune of $40,000 to $60,000 to take care of the back taxes, to take care of the past due things that holding the grip on the household. In exchange for that, the homeowner deeds the land over to us, and we take essentially an equity stake. Let's say the home's worth $200,000. We assist them with $50,000 worth of debt assistance. That homeowner still has $150,000 of equity, but $50,000 of that now is tied to the long-term affordability. We get in, we solidify their financial situation. We also take over the escrowing function for them because we don't want them to slip again. So we're collecting for property taxes and insurance. And then we're often taking care of quite a bit more deferred maintenance that we have on the home because if they didn't have money to make their payments on the taxes, they're also probably letting the home fall apart a little bit. So we're taking care of those things. In exchange for us keeping it in their home, the home then becomes part of the land trust. And we've helped about 20 households buy homes through or convert their homes to land trust homes through the Project Sustain Legacy over the years.
Jeff, we're gonna be wrapping up here soon
Yep.
for our official presentation, and if you can stay
Yeah,
around.
absolutely.
Maybe you want to make a sort of a closing comment.
Okay. So I'll just share a few of the properties across town that are part of the land trust. Some ADUs, single family homes, some duplexes, those kinds of things. Yes.
Oh, sorry. I'm just thinking about what about homeowners that aren't.
Yeah, so this phenomenon really kind of happened, for me at least, following the killing of George Floyd, where I'd say once a week, I either get a phone call or an email from what I'll call a benevolent homeowner, even a benevolent landlord or investor who reaches out to us and says, look, I don't want to sell to an investor. I think my home would be perfect for the land trust. And out of the gates, what we say is, look, we would be very interested, but we're looking for at least a 20% discount off the appraised value of your home. We will buy it. We'll use our real estate company, so there won't be any real estate cost to you. And we'll buy it as is. So if there's repairs, we'll assume those repairs as well. So we've purchased 5 or 6 homes now, on average, not just a 20% discount, but on average a 41% discount off the appraised value, which really helps us in leveraging additional dollars to go in and either take care of the deferred maintenance or the additional affordability gap to turn around those homes and make them affordable. Yes. Me too. Yeah, so a number of households have been well.
Jeff, why don't you talk into the microphone? Just repeat it. So people-
Sure, so the question was, could somebody just put their home in the land trust, stay in there, and then at some point in time, a future trigger, a selling or a passing would then allow us to make that home affordable? Yes, the answer is yes, we could do that. We have not done that. We have had a number of homeowners who have left their homes in their wills to the land trust, or they've given us a right of first refusal in their wills to maybe buy. Maybe they want to make sure that their kids get some money. And so they're saying, we'll give the preemptive right to the land trust to buy it at 50% of the future appraised value on the property. In their wills, they've included that language as well.
So, Jeff, thank you so
Yes.
much. We are.
I almost made it clear.
We're very grateful, and we hope this is the beginning of City of Lakes Land Trust. We know more now. I feel affirmed in the decision we made last year. Thank you so much. And please come up with additional questions.
Yes.
That's up to Jeff. All right.
Maybe two slides.
Thank you.